Interestingly, 100 years ago, many philosophers and economists thought that we were going to have a leisure problem here in the 21st century. They thought we were going to have too much vacation on our hands. And they thought this because with industrialization, with assembly line, with techniques in farming, we were becoming more and more productive. And so they thought, wow, we're accomplishing more in a shorter amount of time, which means we should be able to produce everything we need for food and everything else in just a few days. So one really famous economist named John Maynard Keynes, he predicted that now in the 21st century, our current moment, that we would have a 15-hour work week. So we'd work 2 days out of the week, and then we'd have 5 days of rest because we'd be so efficient. That's what they thought. 2 days of work, 5 days of rest, and they were worried. They were concerned. What will people in the 21st century do with all of this time on their hands? Will they have enough hobbies? Will they be able to entertain themselves? It felt like a real crisis for people back in the 1930s. Yeah, we do have a leisure problem. It's not too much leisure, though, is it? It's far, far too little. Interesting, even to compare ourselves to other countries, this seems to be a uniquely American thing, our value of work. So even another highly industrialized Western country like Germany, they work roughly 1,300 hours a year. This is according to the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation. So about 1,300 hours a year. Here in the U.S., we work a little over 1,700, almost 1,800 hours a year. Now that's 400 more hours. Now 40-hour work week, that's 10 more weeks of vacation. Can you imagine adding 10 weeks of vacation to your year? That's unheard of for us. Something about us as Americans, we are maybe just overly tied to our labor, overly expecting that. Why is this? How did this happen? A writer named Derek Thompson in this kind of national magazine called The Atlantic, he says this, I think very insightfully. I don't know whether Derek Thompson's a Christian or not. The Atlantic is certainly not a Christian magazine, but this is what he says. The decline of traditional faith in America has coincided with an explosion of new atheisms. This is really insightful. He says, some people worship beauty, some worship political identities, and others worship their children, but everybody worships something. So it's not just gathering here on a Sunday morning, like we're going to worship, please stand and sing. That's not the only way to worship in our culture. Even if you don't believe in God, you can be worshiping something. He goes on, he says this, and workism is among the most potent of the new religions competing for congregants. It's so accurate. What is workism? It is the belief that work is not only necessary to economic production, but also the centerpiece of one's identity and life purpose. So if you make work the center of who we are as Americans, and you add some anxiety that we aren't enough, you're going to find ourselves as a culture overworking as we consistently try to justify and prove our work and our value. It's going to be a religion of workism. What we need for a healthy relationship with work is not just more vacation time. We need a conversion out of the religion of workism back into an ancient and different way of life. It's where we've been looking at just last week, starting the image of God. It's so beautiful. The image of God. That according to Genesis chapter 1, very first book, first chapter in the Bible, God making all things, it says He makes humanity in His image. In His likeness, He makes all people, male and female. That's kind of a strange phrase for us, image of God. What's that mean? Likeness and its representation. The God, incredible honor of all honors, has made you like Himself. More than that, He's given you this privilege and this purpose of representing Him in our world. That's what the image of God means. So stunning value and worth right off the bat, not tied to your work, but tied to who God is and how He has made you. So we're looking here in these weeks how practical this is. Because the image of God is not just an idea, it's a way of life. It means we are imaging Him living as God lives, doing what he does because he's made us to be like him and to represent him. So this week we're going to look at rest. Something we don't necessarily do so well in our culture, rest. I'm going to confess that I do not do well. Especially here in America, sometimes we wear busyness as just a badge of honor. I do that far too much as a pastor. To represent and say how busy I am, but that's just unhealthy. There's a pride there. There's something dark there. As we are advocating how important our work is, how much we do, something's gone wrong. It's workism, not the image of God. So to explore this here today, we're going to look at a passage from Hebrews chapter 4. If you have a Bible, please open up there with me. Just several verses here. Verses 9 through 11 of Hebrews chapter 4. Again, the image of God and rest. Here's what Hebrews says. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us, therefore, make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. Just love highlighting and honoring these words as distinct, so we say here in our church, this is the word of the Lord, thanks be to God. Some beautiful ideas here in Hebrews chapter 4, 9 through 11. Just want to lay out where I hope to go. Maybe this helps you hang your thoughts as we go through the morning. I want to look, first of all, how there is a pattern of rest that's given to us in this passage. There's a pattern that we're trying to emulate, a model. Secondly, there's a pathway, how we enter into rest. And thirdly, there's a paradox, a tension that I want to explore. So first of all, pattern, then a pathway, then a paradox. So stay with me here this morning. First of all, let's look at the pattern of rest that is given to us here in Hebrews chapter 4. That our model of rest is not derived from looking internally about what we would most like to do. We're often leading ourselves astray. We are terrible taskmasters over ourselves. So being a model unto yourself often leads to unhealth. There's a different place we look. And in Hebrews chapter 4, it tells us there's God in his own rest. That God is resting. What a crazy idea. Where does the author of Hebrews get this from? It goes back to Genesis chapter 1 here. So go back here with me. Chapter 2, rather, right at the end. Says, thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. God has just spoken into existence all creation. He's just completed it all in their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, get this, he rested from all his work. Keeps going. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because on it he rested from the work of creating that he had done. Now just sit with me in some of the wonder of what this says. If you're familiar with the Bible, it's like, yeah, I know God rested on the seventh day, but what a weird thing to say God is resting. Because if we really affirm what the scriptures say, that God is the one who has all power, nothing is too hard for him, that he has no limit. He is the Almighty. He's perfect in all his ways. There is no lack. Then how could God be in a place of weakness that he would require resting? So what is this? Has God gotten done with this labor over 6 days and is just a wee bit exhausted and needs to take a seat? Is that what Genesis is saying? No, not at all. We know that God, being infinite and all-powerful, he does not need rest physically, so it instantly ties us in that this rest is something different. You with me? So what kind of rest is God doing? If it's not a physical, I need to take a break and take a seat, what kind of beautiful rest must God be doing that's going to be a pattern for us? So here's 3 things I want to look about at God's rest that we're going to be invited into. First of all here, God's rest, it's accomplishing, it's finished. That's what it means by him resting. It's not a lack in physical exhaustion, it's a statement saying he is no longer working in the way he was the previous 6 days. He is done and finished with his work. Beautifully, you can look at those 6 days of creation and what God has just gotten done doing. The first 3 days uniquely are almost like God's creating an environment, a habitat. And then in the second set of days, the second 3, he's filling that habitat. So in the first day, he's creating the heavens and light. The second day, poetically, God is creating the sky and the waters. The third day, God creates land. Now, it mirrors them with the next set of 3 days by filling each of those habitats. With this light, God creates the sun and moon and stars to fill that space. The fifth day, he makes these birds and fish to fill the sky and the waters. And the sixth day, the land, he creates plants and animals. And ultimately, what's the pinnacle of God's creating work? What's the last thing that he makes in creation? Humanity, mankind, in his image, critically, on the sixth day. But on the seventh, the Hebrew word Shabbat, God is resting because he's done creating. So that's where we get the word Sabbath from. On the Saturday, the seventh day, the Shabbat, the Sabbath, God is resting because he's no longer creating. So that's very critically one part of what it means for God to rest. He's done with his work. We're going to come back to that. Secondly, this means God, I love it, he's enjoying his creation. He's delighting in what he has made. This is what his rest means. He's not being passive, like, did that turn my back? But now it's this active appreciation for everything that he's made. It was good. And my parents are in town. Nicole and I have amazing in-laws on each side, and often when my father-in-law comes, there's projects he's doing on our home. And my mom and dad just came this week, and because they love us very kindly, like, what can we do to help you? We've had one area of our home I've not wanted to touch for years, and it's our garage. Like, it's an abomination. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's like the Mordor of our home. Like, everything goes there to die. You just don't even think about it. So we completed house projects, and you know what happens. Like, all the dirty stuff that you just stick it in a corner, and you forget about it for years. And you just keep doing that and doing that. It was not usable anymore. We've not had electricity in our garage, so it's just dark, dusty, full of spiders. So I'm like, I'm just done. Kind of praying, Lord, just burn our garage down, and we'll get insurance money and a new garage. But my dad came. He's like, what can we do for you? It's like, if you want to try cleaning our garage. And it wasn't a 6-day work of creation, but like pretty close. I think it was about 4 days of my dad just laboring and cleaning and dusting, and he got all these hangers, and he hung up all our tools. Like, it's unreal. I'm a little ashamed to tell you this right now. My own laziness in not accomplishing it, but it was incredible what my dad got done. I can tell you, I enjoyed seeing the fruit of his labor, but I also asked him, is it enjoyable to see what you've done? And it was. The difference was massive from chaos and disorder into him bringing genuinely like a bit of beauty and order to the worst space of our home. He enjoyed getting to see that. There's a satisfaction in our labor that I know you all have tasted before as well. This is what God is doing as he sees what he's spoken into existence. It's like, this is so good. Absolutely love what I've made. You consider God in that way? Very happy with creation? I hope you're enjoying spring, but I don't think you're nearly enjoying spring as much as God is. That he's the author of, and every year, this is beautiful. I love my work. Psalm 104 speaks about God delighting in the work of his hands. It's just, you see him as happy and glad, joyful, you participating in that. That's what God is doing in his rest. It's full of gladness and enjoyment. Man, God is having a great time. Thirdly, however, this rest means it's continuing. It's ongoing, which you might not think when you think there's 7 days and he rested on the seventh. Then Sunday, or the first day of the week, starts all over again, so then God's not resting anymore. But very interestingly, there's a lot of poetic rhythms in Genesis chapter 1. And at the end of each day it says, and then there was evening, and there was morning the first day. Then there was evening, and there was morning the second day. And so on, third, fourth, fifth, sixth day. However, on the seventh day, commentators will notice it never says there was evening and there was mourning on the seventh day. Now, why is this? It seems to be hinting in the text that the seventh day is ongoing. It didn't resolve. In other words, God is still resting. He's still delighting in what he has made. He's still upholding it, breathing it into existence, maintaining it. This actually brings to mind a lot of moms, right? You bring into existence a little human, but your work's not done yet, right? You're constantly maintaining and sustaining them. That's actually a very picture of God and making all things. It does not exist apart from him. He's constantly sustaining in it and delighting in it and cherishing it. So the Sabbath has not stopped. God's delight is continuing and his enjoyment is ongoing. That powerfully is our pattern for rest. That it's not meant to be a one-off moment in a week. It's not meant to just be passivity, but there's active enjoyment in a ceasing from labor. Do you see this? So God is the pattern for our rest. Secondly here, if this is the good kind of leisure, if you will, that we are invited into, how do we arrive there? What's the pathway into this kind of rest? Now you might be thinking with me, I got you, Caleb. God makes all things. He has a Sabbath. And then later, God tells us to Sabbath. He wants us to take one day out of the 7 to rest. So that must be the pathway into it. Like that we're supposed to take one day out of the week to come to church, do this kind of thing, to rest and not do our labor. And that's how we also walk in God's ways. We're going to talk more about this, but it's far deeper than that. Now, even just consider, if your true deep Sabbath was just resting one day a week, that doesn't really look a whole lot like God's rest that you're invited into. If you're just ceasing physically for one day from physical labor, is that really entering into the ongoing, joyful pleasure of God in his rest? I don't think that's it. There's something more going on here. Let me say it this way. God often gives physical instructions to his people to be a sign and a picture of a greater inward spiritual reality that he will one day give us. It's important. So God gives physical instructions to his people so that would be like an image, a sign, this picture of what he's one day going to do spiritually in us that's a greater work. So all these pictures in the Old Testament, God is an artist showing us again and again and again what he one day will do in the heart of people. So we got to look at the physical sign to see what is God doing in us spiritually. You follow me? So God tells Abraham in the Old Testament, he says, you need to circumcise yourself and every person that belongs to your household who is male. I mean, that's just odd, no matter how you look at it, right? Like, I know you've been in church maybe for a while, you've read the Bible, but just that's weird. Why is God doing that? Because he's painting a picture. And he's saying, one day I will remove from you your sinful, wicked, fleshly ways so that you will follow me. I will remove from you the things that are trapping you and holding you down and corrupting you, your sinful, fleshly ways, and I will teach you my ways. This is why Romans says that circumcision is really a matter of the heart, something inward. Or take this again. When the people of Israel are slaves in Egypt, and God is rescuing them powerfully through these different wonders, judging Egypt, the last one he says, my people, you need to take the blood of a lamb, an unblemished, spotless, perfect lamb, and you need to take that blood and put it on the doorposts and frame of your home. And then when the angel of death comes to judge Egypt, it will see the blood on your door and it will pass over you. Now, is God just doing something strange, or do you think he's pointing towards something more that he's looking to do? That in the same way that there will be another lamb who comes who is spotless and unblemished in every way. And that lamb will have their blood shed in Jesus Christ, the true Lamb of God. And that him on the cross dying for humanity, his blood being poured out, covers the door of your home, the door of your heart, so that now you are made clean. And when death comes, it passes over you because you belong to the King. So his blood is the thing that saves and covers and holds you. This is a picture of what God will one day do. As we just sang about, the blood, the lamb, what a wonder that would save us. Can I give you one more? Just one more time. When Moses is leading the people of Israel through the desert, they all become thirsty and start to complain to God, "Where is water? Where is water?" And God tells Moses, "I want you to take your staff and I want you to strike this rock in the desert. And out of this rock will flow water that will give life to my people." You know, again, God's not just doing something random. He's knowing what he will one day do in Christ, that he also will be the rock that is struck, that he struck on the cross so that through him the water of life, true eternal life and knowing God will flow to all nations and to all people, to satisfy us in the deepest ways that we are craving for. There is a real rock, spiritually, that has been struck, and his name is Jesus Christ. So again and again and again, God is painting a picture of what he will one day do. So when you hear about Sabbath rest, you got to immediately think, what picture is God painting of who Jesus Christ is? That God is saying, look, there's all these days to work, but I want one day for you not to work at all. Takes this very seriously. I don't want you collecting firewood. I don't want you making food. I don't want you doing any work. That this would be a day of rest for you. Knowing that there will be a time in the future when we are invited into a rest that requires us to cease from our works. That this deeper spiritual rest that we are invited into cannot, hear me, cannot be entered into by our righteousness and by the works that we try to do. God is saying, you must lay that down. You got to give that up. Every little hint of self-justification that you want to bring, that needs to go away. Because there's only one way, only one pathway to enter into my rest. And that is trust, rest, looking to Jesus. Hear this again, Hebrews chapter 4. This is verse 1, the beginning of the passage. It says, therefore, since the promise of entering his rest, like this is the model, the pattern we're after, it still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. What a disaster to not have the rest of God in your inner being when you're invited into it. He says, for we also have had the good news proclaimed to us just as they did, but get this, but the message they heard was of no value to them because they did not share the faith of those who obeyed. Now we who have believed enter that rest. It's by your trust. In other words, it's by your ceasing to look to yourself and what might be good or right or enough about you and saying, I give up on that project of self-justification and I allow Jesus to be enough for me. Isn't this why Jesus says to people, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. You know Jesus isn't just talking to day laborers, maybe carrying a load on their shoulders. He's talking to people who have a burden internally, whose hearts are weighed down and exhausted, and they don't know where to go. And Jesus is saying, you come to me. In other words, you trust in me. You look to me, and I will give you the deep heart rest of God that your soul is craving. This is really amazing news for you if your heart feels inadequate. If you're mildly impressed with yourself or think you might have what it takes, secretly, this doesn't strike you as phenomenal news. But if you're in this room and you feel more covered by your shame, you feel like there's no way God would want anything to do with you, that you're never going to be enough because you're so haunted by who you are and what you have done, that there's no hope for you, this is phenomenal good news. You're actually farther along on the journey, recognizing you don't have what it takes. And the only way for you to enter in is by the kindness and grace of God. Saying, trust in me, look to my work, and I will be enough for you. I think it's marvelous that when God was creating the world, he had 6 days where he was speaking things into existence. As we looked at, on the 6th day was the day God made humanity, brought us into being. So isn't it fitting that when Jesus Christ comes, not for the creation of mankind, but for our redemption, what day is Jesus redeeming the world? As he comes into Jerusalem on the first day of the week into Bethany, he goes through this Holy Week. On what day is Jesus crucified? Friday, the sixth day. Because it's so fitting that on the day God made mankind, this would also be the day that Jesus redeems mankind. That on the day he created them in his image, it's also the day that Jesus redeems and buys back our image. That he takes us back from sin and from death and from the enemy and says, now you are mine again because I've paid this cost on the cross. It's so fitting that when God is done with his work on the sixth day, so also Jesus is done with his labor on the sixth day. As we looked at last week, why he cries out from the cross, it is finished. Meaning I've done the labor necessary to redeem you, and now I'm entering into my rest because redemption's done. And have you entered into that rest where you truly know deep in your spirit, Jesus, you are so more than sufficient for me. And I'm not going to cling to any of my own life. I'm not going to cling to any of my good works, what I might be able to do, but I know I'm fully accepted by you, oh God, simply because of Jesus. It is finished by him. That's the pathway. Can I just encourage some of you students that I know are graduating? You're about to head into new life. There is this pressure of workism, especially the 10,000 questions you've received about what are you going to be doing next? What are you going to be doing next? What are you going to be doing next? And there's a lot of anxiety that can come in a student's heart because you feel like you have to say who you're becoming and why you matter and how you've figured things out. Because there is this deception going on in our hearts that maybe that pressure you feel might be a little bit more than just paying a bill. You feel you're trying to say why you matter in the world. But I hope you look back to this place. You can realize maybe some of the anxiety of my heart is coming because I really am not entering into the rest of God fully. I still think there's something about what I need to do to have a great, meaningful, impressive job to be content with who I am, rather than being content because I know who Jesus is and what he's done for me. Same for so many of us who are lost in our work. Why? This is how you deconvert from workism. You look at the work of Jesus and you say, you're more than enough for me. That's where your heart finds rest. Jesus, you are more than enough for me. I receive your work. I enter into your ongoing joyful rest. Lastly here, there's a paradox in this passage. It's really important for us to explore. We enter into rest only through faith, but there's a bit of a tension here introduced for us. Look at this one more time. Hebrews chapter 4, 9 through 11 says this. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works. Such a good idea, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their examples of disobedience. So just when this passage seems to be clear, it throws us a curveball. And it's saying the way you enter into rest is by striving, which is weird. You just told me I need to cease from my works, and now you need to say that I must strive and make every effort. How is this going together, right? I need to cease from my labor, and at the same time, I need to make every effort. And somehow these two things go together. Do you feel this paradox? Which one is it? These actually do deeply go together. There's a bit of a difference between entering into the rest of God, this pathway, and functionally enjoying it and being with God. It's actually a lot more common in our lives. Just go with me in a marriage metaphor right here. When Nicole and I, my wife, were engaged, we had this opportunity to go on a retreat with a lot of married pastors. We got to sit down with them and have a lot of breakfast, lunches, and we were asking them about their marriages and how to have a healthy marriage. Do you know that none of them said just like, you know what, this great thing for your marriage? Just coast, right? Just hit the easy button and don't invest, right? Just go passive and your marriage will just be fine. Not like every single one of them had some thought that meant being intentional and putting in every effort into our marriage that it might be great. Now, it wasn't about you need to do this so that your marriage or wedding ceremony will happen. I knew I was being received by grace in this person, that I have flaws and errors, and this person is entering into relationship with me out of the kindness of their heart and grace, right? You know that's how marriage is occurring. They're accepting all of who you are graciously. But now as you're in the relationship, it requires a striving and a pursuit and an intentionality for you to enjoy everything that relationship has to offer. In the same way, you have been, by faith, graciously received in all that you are by Jesus Christ. He's not saying, I want parts of you. He says, I want this ugly, nasty, hidden part of you and all the best outward things that you think are great. I'm taking the entirety of who you are to myself, and I'm going to redeem you. I'm going to work in you. But he's not inviting us into passivity. He's saying, I want you to strive to know me, seek my face. So here's 3 ways we live into this paradox, into this tension. It's going to go quick. I know we're right here at the end. You're like, how long is this going to go? Really, real quick, 3 more points here that are very important for us. First of all, you need to practice Sabbath in order to enjoy Sabbath. Almost added other words in here, that you need to practice a physical Sabbath in order to enjoy a spiritual Sabbath. There is something helpful about stopping one day out of the week, whether that's a Saturday or a Sunday, if you're a pastor, maybe a Monday. Some day in the week, you're stopping your work so that you can intentionally seek God and to be with Him. And this sows something into the rest of your week when you do this. So this doesn't necessarily need to be that, like, hey, do you just only read your Bible all day or only sit in church all day? And that's not what I mean. We've looked at before that we can glorify and enjoy God in doing so many things. Watch a movie with your family, play board game with friends. All of these things are great ways to delight in who God is and His people. But there is something necessary about Godward activities that you engage in more substantively one day a week. We say, this is my anchor day, you're saying. My anchor day to seek the face of God. That would just be a fertilizer in my relationship with Him that just gets spread out through the rest of the week. So even if I am a little bit too lost in this or that or other activities in my schedule, I know I have this anchor moment to hold me near Him. Do you have that kind of rest in your life? This is not all God is inviting you into. Again, it's a spiritual Sabbath, but the physical Sabbath is a massive practice for us to enjoy Him spiritually. What is your day of rest? Or are you constantly adding more? Secondly, here, we need to be active, not passive in our rest. Active, not passive in our rest. It strikes me a lot. I think for many of us Americans, what we mean by rest often means checking out. I'm ceasing not just from my work, but I'm just checking out entirely from life. We talked about this last week. Let me jump onto Netflix. Let me get on Facebook for a little while. You're younger, on TikTok. You spend time there because you're just looking to retreat. It's a passive action that you're disengaging rather, from all the complications of your world. But you all know that when you're done watching Netflix for 2 hours, you don't get done turning off the TV and you say, I feel amazing, right? I feel so restored. I feel so renewed. Thank you, Facebook, for that 30 minutes. I'm alive in my heart now. No one ever feels that way because we know it's not a place of rest. We know it's a place of escapism. That's passivity. So if you have time on your hands and you feel exhausted, the counterintuitive nature of this is you need to strive in order to rest. It's hard. You're exhausted from your week. You want to check out. You don't want to think, do anymore. But there's a little bit more required in your striving to actually step into the enjoyment of rest that you need. If you actually engaged in picking up a really good, life-giving book and just read a chapter, you would get done and you'd say, I feel so much better. Yes, it requires a bit more engagement from you mentally. Yes, it's not as easy as turning on the TV, but you're sowing something into your heart. Be active in your rest to pursue God, not passive in disengagement, letting other things merely entertain you. Thirdly here, when you rest, rest. Stealing this from Dane Ortland. He's got a great blog, More Ideas on How to Rest. Encourage you to check that out. Really helped by this. When you rest, rest. Similarly, I feel in my own life, when I finally set aside time to do something substantively and good with God or with family, doesn't it feel like there's just 1,000 little interruptions that come up, right? Like let me just do that thing real quick. Like I'll just answer these few texts or run over here and do this thing or that thing, but we're just breaking it up. We're letting all these little things steal us back into the busyness of life. So when you rest, like truly rest. Don't let it be interrupted by all 1,000 distractions. Like a swarm of locusts just come and steal everything that was there, right? Just little bit by little bit, it's all gone. So let your time be protected so that when you rest, you actually rest. And when you rest, you actually enjoy being in the presence of the God that you were made to be with. Even right now, you're invited into that rest. I'm going to invite our communion team to get up, as well as our band. I'm going to take a moment for recognition of God, recognition of how we are not enough for this relationship. We call this confession. So I have a confession up here on this screen. Then I'm going to ask you to read out loud the portion that's in bold, which is most of this slide. It can be a bit foreign, weird for people to read out loud together. Just embrace that with me. It's kind of the beauty of being a body. It's not just an individual, you alone, but you're recognizing this is a we issue, that I'm a part of a body, a community that's in this wrestling together. But as you read this, even as we're recognizing it's us, it's the greater community challenge, I hope you also mean it from the heart. So here's our confession. It says this: Holy God, we confess that we have pridefully worked when we ought to have rested. Forgive us for when we have tried to work for any of your grace. Restore our hearts to rest in your finished work, Jesus. Just take a moment, sit in this confession. In the silence of your heart, explore that more. Where are you tempted to earn his grace? Where have you been tempted to pridefully just press on, that everything depends on you? Give that to him here. I call this a gospel reminder. It's a truth that brings us back to who Jesus is and his finished work. It says this, Romans 8, 1-4, therefore there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because through Christ Jesus, the law of the Spirit who gives life has set you free from the law of sin and death. Everything that separated you, held you from God, the Spirit is bringing freedom. It goes on, it says, for what the law was powerless to do, because it was weakened by the flesh, we were not enough. God did. He's the one who accomplished it by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh to be a sin offering, be the sacrifice that redeems. And so he condemned sin in the flesh in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fully met in us. What we could never achieve is now being achieved because of Jesus and what he's done, as we do not live according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. Here's your freedom. The work of God and the Spirit in you. So we're going to take communion now. We're going to have these two stations up front. Just going to invite you, as we're in the midst of worship, to come down this center aisle. You're going to take a piece of bread, and you're going to hear the person say, the body of Christ broken for you. Then you'll dip it in the juice, and they'll say, the blood of Christ poured out for you. And you'll take it, and you'll eat it right there, or you can receive it as you're back in worship or sitting in your seat. You are receiving your pathway into rest. Recognize that. So come in your weary, burdened heart and say, Jesus, I'm coming to you. And by eating this bread dipped in juice, I'm recognizing this, your life given for me, is the way I enter into your divine delight. If you're not comfortable taking communion, genuinely, I know we have people just exploring what it means to know Jesus. Please do not feel pressure to take communion. We still ask you to get up and come down this center aisle just because there's people in the pew after you. It's a bit too tight to get past you. So you can just come down this center aisle and around to the outside and back to your seat. Please don't feel pressure. We have many people, even in our church, who love Jesus that don't take communion every week. They feel the judgment of their heart and they just want to be in prayer, so don't feel pressure. But in that, may God meet you with his gracious presence. In that, would you all stand and worship with us and come forward and take communion as you are ready?